Here we are.
Hello, and welcome to Mark My Words, a podcast series that offers a glimpse into alternative paradigms hiding just beneath the surface of everyday life. And our first question is always, what if? Today, we're once again speaking with Mark Cornelius about his most recent book, UnMeasuring. And in this book, Mark is asking us and urging us to perhaps maybe take a look at another paradigm shift, as we've spoken in the past. And is actually, in order to do this, he's also requesting that we take a look at our predisposed mindset of measurement. And if you can see it on your screen there, you'll probably notice that we've got a broken ruler. Mark, good morning. Would you like to explain that broken ruler that you have there for us?
Well, sure, Paul. And that broken ruler represents not just the way the world looks at things and the rules of life, so to speak. It also represents me, you, and the problems we have with predisposed ideas. Instead of listening to one another with an unmeasured bias, where we're not trying to come up with an argument against or for somebody's opinions, I propose the idea that we look at people or listen to people in a different way, an unmeasured way, breaking our rulers, so that we are just purely listening to their story. That story is what we want to try to get a clear understanding of, not whether they are right or wrong or left or right or up or down, but whether they have a history that is comparative to ours. And by comparative, that's exactly what it is. What did they have to go through to get to where they are now? What do we have to do? And that ruler represents me breaking my rulers, not my breaking their rulers.
So is this kind of a form of self-control as well, or is it a form of just trying to get, you had mentioned before about trying to abandon our mindset of measurement and how we judge and measure things and therefore other people. Is this kind of like readjusting ourselves into a more listening environment, into a, how do you suggest that we go about this?
Precisely. In listening, there's some methodologies to do that. And those are, I could go through a list, but the bottom line is shut up.
Good call.
Shut up.
Great call.
Because when I'm busy talking, I'm not listening to you. If I'm busy thinking up here, I'm talking to myself rather than listening to what you have to say. If I'm giving you an opinion, you're busy thinking of your own opinion. And what I say is we have to take a step back, and it is a discipline. It's a step back to say, okay, I want to know as much about Paul as I can before we get into any real dialogue. So let's go back in history, not just a bit, a lot. Let's go to the origins of Paul. And by that, some people call it a creation story. Some people call it an origin of ideas. But where did you come from? What was your childhood like? What was your, and I'm not getting Freudian here because nobody's trying to analyze. But, listening truly to the content of what influenced you to get you to your opinions. I'm not really interested in what your opinion is now. Might get there later. But first, let's find out who you are, what you are, why you are. Those things. So listening is, in its pure sense, silence.
And taking in some things.
And taking in some things.
And there's the rub, right?
The
Are we
problem,
blocking ourselves? Are we blocking ourselves possibly from being able to take in someone else's history, someone else's story?
try for just a moment to listen to someone, and after they are through speaking, wait to the count of 10. That's an eternity, right?
It it seems to us in this world it does. It seems like
Yeah.
it's faster, it's slower than a drive-through.
Not only that, but when you do that, there's that possibility, that very not remote possibility. I won't get sarcastic. That person who you were listening to is going to start talking again. God forbid that happens, because you might have to listen for a while,
That's right.
and you might actually get some more information that you didn't have before.
Well, that sounds good on its face, and I know that you probably have in your book, you probably have some tools to help us learn how to unmeasure and learn how to listen better and how to pause before we speak and how to try not to think while someone else is speaking. Um, how do you put all of that together and make that? Because that is, for many of us, that is a true shift in the way that we have been, in many ways, brought up. Because we've been brought up not only to be individuals, but also to be individuals with opinions.
Good question. Great question, Paul. Listening unmeasurably is not a skill, it is a practice. And that's a huge difference. Just like a doctor or a lawyer or a athlete practices, they never achieve what they're going after. They're consistently and constantly in the discipline learning more about how to achieve every time they do it. So the way I have learned to do this, I am not a master at this. Trust me.
Huh,
I'm as quick to try to jump in on a conversation as anyone. But when I get it right, I learn amazing things about the people I listen to. Then I feed that back to them. In other words, if you were to say to me, during my childhood, Mark, I, would ride down the street to, whatever, to the lake. And then that's where I would play with my friends and then come back to it. So you like riding your bike a lot? And you might say to me, yeah, I liked riding my bike a lot. Or you might say, no, it was just a method for me to get to where my friends were. That helps me understand who you are. So that's a way of understanding people better and repeating what they've said to get a better clarification. Rather than my saying, Paul, it sounds to me like riding a bike was good therapy for you, a good exercise. And maybe you should consider doing that more. Well, that I just threw in my whole opinion on bike riding to you. It might have nothing to do with your story.
that's right. And of course, that's what the other party might hear, is they may only hear your suggestion rather than the fact that you actually are understanding. You're just trying to contribute
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
making your contribution. Which brings back to the difference of being understood versus understanding. And what do we do to make sure that we're not trying to alter someone's history or someone's story by trying to be understood rather than simply understanding their story or simply listening to their story? And I use the term simply loosely.
Right.
Because I know, I understand through your book as well, that most of us have been programmed in many ways or been educated in many ways not to just understand something. We either need to figure out how to explain it or whatever. So what's your approach on that?
Good question. Two things. First of all, again, I'm going to repeat because you heard it correctly. Being understood means that somebody has to be sharing a story. This should never, ever start with the idea, okay, tell me your opinion on, I'm going to make up something to stay out of any political or any kind of society thing right now, but tell me your opinion on oak trees, Paul. That's not what this is about. It's about the idea of making sure that we are listening to the person's story. Paul, would you mind sharing with me a little bit about your origins, where you came from, etc.? Be quiet, listen, let the person speak as long as they want, and that's the toughest part right there, I'll admit. And then feed it back to them. If you're listening correctly, when you feed it back, they'll nod their head and say, "You got it. You understand where I came from." Well, that's wonderful. That's exactly what we're after. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it did. And as a matter of fact, it brought up something else there that as I was listening to you and listening to you talk about understanding, I noticed I found myself wanting to label certain things. And therefore, I am not just listening at that point, I'm also measuring. I'm figuring out a way to put a label that I can understand on you. And that makes it rather, it can get very unpredictable at times in terms of being able to build trust or being able to build the understanding that you're mentioning. I know you've mentioned that in unmeasuring as well. And perhaps we need another episode to discuss that particular topic, because I believe we might be kind of placing ourselves in a time frame.
It right out there to the end. That's exactly right.
That's exactly right. Do you have a website that folks can go to basically take a look at unmeasuring?
I do, as a matter of fact. So I am sharing my screen right now. Hold on here, because I was busy while you were talking, listening to you and what you would like to hear in this whole episode. So that's important. Hold on here, and we're going to go to exactly that. My contact information, is that showing up there?
Absolutely, it sure is, Mark. Thank you.
We got this part down then. Okay, so the best place to go to learn about unmeasuring and what that means and how to put that into practice in your life and create what I call a covenant with other people rather than a contractual listening mode, is to go to the website www.rutmanagement.com, and you will find unmeasuring in there. Click on it. You can get the email copy. Excuse me, listen to me. You can get the ebook copy, or you can get a paperback copy. And I think you'll find that to be a very, very eye-opening book for you. It was one that opened my eyes as I was writing it, because I realized how poor a listener I truly was until I really started practicing my listening.
Well, that's wonderful. I also noticed the YouTube channel that you have there listed.
And we're working on that one, getting some more content out there. So go see what we've got so far on rut management, and would love to hear people's reactions. They can also email to markcwrights@gmail.com. And there's a Facebook page where we can dialogue as well.
Wonderful. I think you folks have got all the information here. Happy to share it again with you at a later date as well. We've been listening to Mark Cornelius speaking about his most recent book, UnMeasuring. And I truly appreciate everyone listening in. Mark, I very much, friend to friend, I very much appreciate your insight on some of this stuff. So anyway, I guess we should just sign off for right now.
Well, let's sign off on the recording, and so long, folks. Keep thinking.